Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us again. We are joined today not only with Mark Bridger Prescott, as usual, but our very special guest is Andrew Hale, who used to be the chair of the Association of Into Dogs. I was lucky enough to be his vice chair, and I'm delighted to have him back. Andrew is a certified behaviorist and trainer. He is also the behaviorist for Pet Remedy. He runs the dog-centered care, and he talks an awful lot about the emotionality of animals. Um, the reason we have him on here tonight is not only because we love him, but he is also going to be talking about emotional safety, which is something we all need to have a look at over the Christmas period, over all the holidays and festive periods. And as a nod to Andrew, I don't know if you can see, I actually have a Dalek right in front of the tree just for
Ah,
you. There
thank you.
you
Well,
go.
I
So
have
I'm going to
K9.
pass it
That's
over to you.
K9 up there. Yeah, must be K9.
Oh
How you doing?
no,
Yeah,
I have to
so
get
there you
one of those
go.
now.
Mm.
My Dalek moves. If you pull him back, he shoots forward.
Oh, cool.
So, listen, thank you so much for joining us today. And as my internet is, as Mark said, very unstable, I'm going to pass it over to you. Please tell us a bit about your dog centered care and what you do with Pet Remedy. Um, Also, we'd love to know how Pet Remedy can help pets if they're anxious over the Christmas, and emotional safety. How can we keep ourselves and our dogs, cats, hamsters, parrots, whatever we have, safe for the festive season?
Well, Dog Centre Care, that's my Facebook group. Really, it's an open group, so anybody can join. And I set that up really just as a safe space to allow a conversation about thinking about the emotional experience of dogs and their caregivers. That's the whole point, because this is a relatively new way of looking at things. I say relatively, this people have been talking about this for about 30 years, but it's come into focus now a little bit. And that's what Dog Centre Care is about. I took the title from a lot of the progressive side of child educational psychology and development. So, we have a child-centered approach, patient-centered approach, and this is just a dog-centered approach. So that's the Dog Centre Care group. I get a chance to interview a lot of wonderful people. You've been interviewed in there along with June. We did a conversation on bereavement, of course, and it's built up. I can't believe it. Really, it's there's like 75 plus conversations on the YouTube channel now, and yeah, it's a really good community, and people are really thinking outside of the norms. Really, the kind of received wisdoms are being shook up a little bit. So that's that. Pet Remedy. Well, I love the product Pet Remedy. It's a natural calming product for animals. Oh yeah, there you go. And
There you go.
what I love about Pet Remedy is two things. One, it's a great product in as far as it. Robert Faulkner Taylor, who's done a chap as part of this series on pain, of course. Robert came into the Pet Remedy fold and looked at all the science for us. And there's a great little 15-minute video. Perhaps we can share it actually on Interdog's page
Oh,
of
absolutely.
Robert talking about the science behind the product and how it works. And so it's a great product on that side because it can help a lot. I love working with Pet Remedy because one of my little missions that I set myself a couple of years ago was to think about how do we break away from our normal social media bubbles, and how do we get to source? And the source is the general public. So that's what I love about Pet Remedy. They've been really it took me a while to bed in, I have to say, but they really came around to a lot of this stuff, and I just love it as a platform and as an opportunity to get really good information out to the general public. Because if they're holding a product in their hand that says emotional well-being for their dog, already just psychologically thinking, well, maybe I need to think about my dog's emotional well-being then. And it has a big knock-on effect. So there's some exciting things happening with a big pet retailer here in the UK, the biggest one, you could probably guess who that is, who are adopting some things based on input from myself and Robert and others. So these things have a ripple effect. So that's the thing about Pet Remedy. What I love about using Pet Remedy, people tend to use the product when the dog or the cat or the rabbit, whatever it is, it's multi-species, which is really helpful, is already in a very highly aroused, anxious state. So it can help then for sure. But the real power is having it all the time. and really supporting a kind of a well-being bridge really through different aspects. It's used a lot in rescue, for example, and that kind of thing, because it can be one thing that the dog has an olfactory connection to all the way through the different processes. But yeah, so there you go. That's my few things. What was the last thing? Oh yeah, about being safe. I think we can unpack this a little bit now together, but I focus a lot on the emotional experience lens because I feel that it's the one that offers us the most opportunity to really connect and to have a more empathetic approach. The wonderful Brené Brown says empathy fuels connection, sympathy drives disconnection. And what she means by that is to be sympathetic is okay, but often when we sympathize with another person or sympathize with a dog, it does create a bit of a power imbalance. So you might share something with me, Denise, and I might be, oh, yeah, I'm very sympathetic, Denise. But what I'm really saying is, oh, it's happened to you, it hasn't happened to me. So it creates a bit of this. And often we get a but involved with sympathy. I sympathize, but I still expect you to do what I want. I still expect you to do your job. Whatever. And an empathetic way of working, it really does create a connection. For me, empathy is about being available to, turning up to the lived experience, the emotional experience of another, and feeling it like it's your own, really. And that's the connection. There is no but with empathy. If somebody says I empathize, but they don't really empathize, because there is no but. So the emotional experience, then we all have one. Us three in this virtual space: the listener, the dog, the cat, the horse. And secondly, they're all unique to us as individuals. This is the beautiful thing. So we used to say, well, we don't know how animals think and feel, so we'll ignore that bit and just see what we can make them do or not do. And that's how we used to, that's the metric by which we used to just purely look at progress. Is this behavior increasing or decreasing? But I don't know how you two think and feel. That's the point. So should I just ignore that then and make you do stuff? And this is where we have to start thinking about things differently. So that's why I like thinking about the emotional experience and talking about this from the individual's point of view, because us and our dogs and our cats, we all want to feel heard. When we're trying to communicate need, especially, we don't want to be ignored. We don't want to be corrected, as the man on the telly, the dog trainer on the telly talks about. We want to feel safe. We're going to really unpack safety in a minute. We want to feel safe. And we want to feel relief. Relief's the word I talk about a lot, because for me, it's the most important word, in my opinion, in the psychology of behavior, because when you feel something, especially something that's unpleasant, you seek relief. The whole point of feeling it is a call to arms to get relief. Physical pain, emotional pain, social pain. So this is important then. It's very easy to, I gave a talk at a conference recently where the topic was empathy. And I asked a question at the beginning: is dog training itself an empathetic way of working? And the conclusion we came to at the end is, if we're just going to make behaviors changing, regardless, then actually it's not. It's a bit like me hearing you tell me something, Denise, of importance to you, and then me telling you what you should do about it. Because I think that's what you should do, rather than thinking, what is it Denise actually needs to feel safe and to feel relief? So I think when we turn up then to the emotional experience of another, especially when you think about it as a dog trainer, as a behaviorist, our whole job description is turning up because of the behavior of another. That's the whole point we're there, right? Either to create a behavior or change behavior. So I think if we're going to turn up to another living sentient being and influence their behavior on whatever terms, we have a huge ethical duty to be mindful of the need for safety and the need for relief, and not just be getting behaviors that we want as an only metric. So this brings us on to safety then, which is an important topic. And I think safety has to come first always, even if we're training. The thing is with safety, we tend to have a bias towards thinking about physical safety when we consider the safety of another. And that's because that's what we get feedback from. So we think, oh yeah, my wife's safe because they're at home, my dog's safe because they're in the garden, my husband's safe because he's whatever. But the point is, though, our own brain and our dog's brain, and we'll come on to this in a minute because it's not guesswork, we kind of know it, is just as if not more focused on emotional safety and social safety. And this is why then you can be safe physically, but not feel it. And as the wonderful Rachel Leather says, she's an expert in trauma, you can't teach safety for that reason. You can't teach it. I can teach you physical safety quite easily, not to put your fingers in the plug sockets, Mark. I can teach that, and hopefully you might learn it. But you can't teach emotional social safety in as far as the other has to feel it. Has to feel safe. So emotional safety is an aspect of that. Emotional safety and social safety are very connected, of course, but they are slightly different. And what's interesting is a lot of the stuff that we learnt about these things, when we think about attachment theory, social pain hypothesis, a lot of these things that we talk about, they were done on studies on animals. Social pain hypothesis was done by Panskep, somebody called Panskep, on by taking puppies away from their mom. Puppies would be quite distraught. The puppies would be injected with a mild opioid, which is normally seen as being a physical pain reliever, and the puppies were okay. So he hypothesized, maybe aspects of social pain hurts just like physical pain. Now, when we jump forward to modern day, Matthew Lieberman at UCLA written a great book called Social. Highly recommend it. It's a bit hard going, but it's interesting. But he's proven this through MRI research. So the same part of the brain, and guess what? The dogs have it too, because that was proven, because it was puppies that it was tested on. The part of the brain that fires up when we experience social pain, like social rejection, for example, is the same part of the brain that fires up for physical pain. And that's why the opioid worked. So it's interesting that back in the day when we learned these things like attachment theories, a lot of that was done on rhesus monkeys and stuff. But our human ego back in the day isn't it wonderful what we've learned about us special humans on the back of these animals? Now behavioral science has come around thinking, well, hang on, we learned it from the animals, and maybe we're not that special. Maybe, on many levels, many fundamental foundatory levels, we have a similar experience. And especially when we know that when we are in a very elevated state, when we're in a very stressed state, when we're in a very distressed state, a lot of the human-y bits of the brain that is quite unique to us doesn't even work very well. So this is important then, isn't it? So that's why we're thinking about things differently and thinking, okay, well, the only lived experience I can really validate is my own. So I can only really talk about Andy. I'm going to talk about my experience. But we have to find better ways of turning up to the lived experience of another. And that's my CAKE acronym, which I use because we all love cake, right? Which is compassion, awareness, knowledge, and empathy. Denise, you did a great graphic for that, which I still use in my talk. So CAKE is a great thing to remind ourselves of, because it can be hard to turn up to another's lived experience. And by the way, I just want to mention two things, very important things here. First of all, it's okay not to, by the way. We don't have to become Mother Teresa and think, I've got to turn up to everybody else's stuff. And secondly, we have to, this is why I do a lot of education on this stuff, because it's important for professionals. We have to learn how we can safely turn up to the emotional experience of another, but not be responsible for it. Not be responsible for it, because it's very easy to. We can take on the burden of others very easily. There's something called the righting reflex, which we have to be really mindful of, which is where I've got to make that right. I'm going to make that right. I'm going to make that right. And everybody goes nuts because you can't make it all right. So CAKE, compassion is what helps us turn up. Compassion is not about condoning or being permissive. So this is important then, isn't it? Because it allows us to turn up anyway. So if we've got somebody who's been using shock collars on their dogs, or been not very nice to their dogs, or whatever, it's our compassion that turns up anyway, regardless of our initial judgments. And we will have judgments, because we can't not have judgments. Compassion helps us to change our relationship with those judgments. They don't have to become, those judgments don't have to become what drives our actions. It's the compassion that allows us to turn up. And then awareness, it's about allowing ourselves to be aware of the experience of another. And that is about us navigating our own biases and our own judgments. And that's hard, right? Oh my God, it takes practice sometimes. And just because I think it might be the best thing to do doesn't mean it's the right thing for you. That's the thing. So we have to be aware. And then knowledge, it's the seeking of, we have knowledge, of course we do, because we're the professional. But that's not the knowledge that we're talking about here. It's actively seeking knowledge from the other and hearing their story on their terms, their language, their way of communicating it. It's very powerful. And then with compassion, awareness, and knowledge, we can have empathy. And have that empathetic connection then and think, right, okay, I get that. I hear you. I feel you. You know, this is important. And we bring cake to the dog too. The whole thing about moving from a task-orientated approach, which is the normal training stuff, to a more care-orientated approach is a simple little shift, which is we're going to learn from the dog first. It's as simple as that. I'm going to learn from you first. I have my learn, support, teach in that order. Learn from the dog, support what we've learned. And if we're going to teach anything, make sure the first things we teach are things that we feel are intrinsically valuable to the dog. After that, you can train whatever you like. So there you go. That sets the scene, doesn't it, Denise? Hopefully.
Absolutely, because we're so used to hearing, like, if you don't want the dog doing this, get it to do the opposite, an incompatible behavior. And as much as I used to agree with that, over the years, it's kind of, why is the dog doing it in the first place? Surely that should be the first thing we look at.
Yeah, and that's
it isn't a
important.
case of like cramming this square peg into a round hole and saying, look, you can't do that if you're stuck in here. So I think this is so important that this is coming to light now. People are really taking it on board for change.
And we have to, because the thing is, because that's a really good point, especially mutually exclusive behaviors. So we're all indoctrinated into this is a psychological kind of concept, really, which something called the good bad continuum. This notion that somehow behavior is in itself good or bad or neutral. And underpinning that is that we reward the good and we ignore or punish the bad, depending on what your view is. And we're so indoctrinated into this, Denise, that we don't even question it. We think, well, yeah, well, of course we want more of the good. Of course we want less of the bad. And actually the balanced community, aversive community, are very good at playing into that narrative because it makes sense to the general public. Well, of course I'm going to have a negative consequence here to, you know, all that kind of stuff. But there's a simple question we've got to ask here that changes everything. Who's deciding what's good or bad? That is the point. What's driving their narrative? What did the behavior of that has been decided is bad represent to the other individual? And the behavior that it's being replaced with, what does that represent? And I share this a lot because I don't just have an academic interest in this. I feel it very deeply because of my own lived experience. So I'm married now, I've got a husband, which is great. And we're surrounded by a lot of acceptance and love. But it's crazy to think 60, 70 years ago, I could be in prison for that love because somebody else had decided it was intrinsically bad. So when we think about behavior, then if we, instead of seeing behavior as just being good or bad, we just see it as it is. Most behavior is actually an expression of need, the need to feel connection, the need to feel safe, and the need for relief. It's also an expression of self. This is very important with a lot of doggies. They're just thinking, well, hang on, you've got my brain, you've made my brain be this because I'm
It's
this
also
dog.
a way of getting attention. So where are we failing? What are we missing? Because, you know, we know about displacement behaviors. No, we know all about that. But sometimes these behaviors are attention seeking because they need what you're just going through now, like what you're talking about now.
Well, yeah, and especially the need for relief. I think a lot of these are relief-seeking behaviors and are often fueled by frustration, often. So even with some of the kind of memes that I see in the positive training world, reward the good, ignore the bad. Fair enough. But we have to ask the question, what are we ignoring then? because if we've decided that's bad, then what are we actually ignoring? And if that happens to be a behavior that's seeking connection, remember, dogs need secure, safe, secure social connections, just like we do. They want to have secure attachment. Is it a need for relief as well? So that's why if we learn from the dog first, a lot of this stuff, we have to change how we do our observations around behavior. It's really important. I've learned a lot of that from Sarah Fisher, of course. She's just amazing. And people like Sheila Harper and Linda Rugas and Turid. There's a lot of, and Sindor. There's a lot of people who share this information about these things. And we have to really think, okay, I'm just going to be in the moment with this dog and learn from them. It's always a balancing act, because, some people take this to the extremes, Denise. Everything's on a pendulum, right? I'm actually doing a live in my group next week in this about my actual views on dog training, because I get so misrepresented on it, and I get fed up with it. If I had £1 for every time
well, just remember, was it 2 or 3 years ago you brought out this incredible blog, Beyond the Operant, because I remember doing the artwork for it.
Phantom of the Operant, was it?
Phantom of the Operant, that was it. I should have remembered that, given that I did the poster for it, based on Phantom of the Opera. And the thing that came to mind was how misunderstood it was when it was released. And yet, only yesterday, I saw it being shared again by Neil Rubenstein in the States. It's still getting shared. People are now identifying with it and understanding it, but it took, what, 2 or 3 years? Was it 2021 that came out?
I think about 4 years ago now, actually. I think about 4 years.
Yeah, because you played around with it for quite a while before actually releasing it. Because even then, I remember you saying, I'm not sure people are ready to read this.
It's always a gamble. I think I was a bit naughty with the title, because it's
it was so much fun to work on.
But I think when it came out, the majority of people were very responsive actually to it, and they were like, okay, they weren't necessarily negative but there was quite a core of people who really didn't get it and really wanted to pull it apart. And actually, it was a very simple piece about compassion. That's all it was. It's about being more compassionate. That's all it really was. It definitely wasn't anti-training. This is the reality for me with training. Well, guess what? It's neutral, isn't it? This is the point I'm going to talk about next week. So I'm giving a bit of a spoiler, but it is neutral. It's not good or bad, is it? People say, is training bad? Do you think training's bad? And my late mother had a saying, which has always stuck with me, which is, there's no absolutes but kindness. And I've turned that around a little bit for dogs, which is no absolutes but welfare. And I think we've got to be careful with absolutist messages. I get why people have them, and I get why some people are very anti this, are very anti that, and I get that. And that's often about their own kind of perception of that. But there's all sorts of dogs living in all sorts of communities with all sorts of caregivers. And also, I think we have to be mindful of, we can all have highbrow discussions all we like, but the general public have to have something to hold on to that connects to their normal perception of their relationship with their dogs. So this is the key. This is what I love about changing the language a little bit rather than changing the method, which is just like, I call it the opera merry-go-round. That's what we've been stuck on. Everybody arguing about methods and tools, methods and tools. General public just gets stuck in that. What we need to start letting them know is, okay, I hear that you want to get your dog to walk better on the lead or stop barking at dog, whatever it is. I hear that. I'm going to hear your experience first, and then we're going to hear your dog's experience, and then we're going to see how that is affecting your dog's ability to learn the things that you want them to teach. I think that's really a common sense approach, because a lot of the things that the general public have been convinced that the most important thing and the only thing is a well-trained, obedient dog. And that's, the pendulum's too far that way, because there's no chance for the dog to communicate anything. And they don't know what pain looks like. They don't know what stress looks like. They don't know what body language is about. There was that survey done by the Kennel Club recently that showed that. So I think it's all about just asking some more questions. And that leads us on nicely to this notion of emotional safety, which is what we're going to talk about, because emotional safety has two really important components to it. The first is that you feel safe to feel. And that seems obvious, right? But we've all been in relationships or situations where we feel uncomfortable with our feelings. So you're not feeling emotionally safe now. And secondly, the ability to communicate how you feel and to feel safe with that. That's emotional safety. So when I talk about this I spoke at the London Vet Show this year. So I had vets in the audience, vet nurses, veterinary behaviorists. I talked a bit about emotional safety. I had so much feedback from people saying, you know, within my practice, we have practice managers who are telling me, don't get involved, don't get connected, don't get emotional, you're wearing your heart on your sleeve, all that kind of stuff. Well, guess what? They're still going to have that, but now they feel they can't talk about it. So they are now working within an emotionally unsafe culture at work. We see the same happen in rescue. Sadly, we see the same in some training organizations where there's no pastoral care. You know, we into dogs, you know, we have that. So emotional safety then also applies to the dog. You did some amazing graphics for me for the conference I gave in Kent. Because the analogy I use there for behavior is I work with at least half of my caseload is what people might class as dangerous dogs, you know. And even with those dogs, I never want a dog not to behave how they feel they need to. Now, with these dogs, we have to mitigate for the danger that they might pose. So we have to be mindful of that. Physical safety first. But the analogy that I did, and you did the amazing graphics for it, was of the dog painting a picture for us with their behavior. I need that dog to paint that picture. I need that dog to feel emotionally safe enough to paint a picture. Not what normally happens is that we keep grabbing the brush all the time and saying, I know better, I'll paint it for you. So we need the dog to be able to communicate, and that's emotional safety, and it's really important. And that attaches to social safety, of course. So when we think about polyvagal theory specifically, about how the vagal system is involved in social connections and social safety, when we feel under threat, polyvagal theory kind of points out that the first thing we will do is seek support from a social network. We seek support through our secure attachment. And then if that doesn't come, either because it's not available to us, or that is available to us, but it's denied, we're more likely to go into fight or flight.
I'm just
So,
thinking when you say that, Mark just got a new puppy. He's had it about a week, and he's actually said when the little guy needs security, he'll go and hide between Mark's legs.
yeah.
And it's lovely. I know so many people who either laugh when their dogs do that, or push them away, or
Mm-hmm.
cross their legs so the dogs can't do that. And that is the complete opposite. That dog is seeking safety, and it's their communication to us. And I love when dogs are so communicative
Mm.
to us in those little subtle ways.
Well, it's the only thing they have is their behavior. Now with Molly, our young one, there she is in the middle there. I shared quite a bit of footage at her at one of the conferences that I spoke at this year, because we learned from her first. She told us everything. And there's some great footage of her telling me how she needed to navigate the environment. We have processing, engagement, and exit feedback, and she was telling me all that stuff. All we need with our young dogs really is to teach them that they're safe, that we're their return to safety. And the big one for me is that they have a voice. We need to let them know early on, I will gift you a big voice and I will hear it. And you're absolutely right. A lot of the stuff, especially the dated stuff, which is still on the bloody telly, is, you know, if the puppy's jumping up, get them off. If the puppy's between your legs, step away. If, you know, all this kind of rubbish. And you know, jumping
Yeah,
up is a massive.
because nobody asks why they're doing it.
Well, no, and you can see it, right? You can, if you can, yeah, we've got to be better at informing the general public to be able to join the dots of their dog's behavioral life. I think this is the key. And that comes back to social safety again, which connects to emotional safety. It's feeling safe within social networks and being able to communicate. So it's important for us. So emotional safety is a big one. And in human psychology kind of therapy terms, we have what we call the range of safety. And for as practitioners, we need to be mindful of that, because I have my physical, emotional, and social safety needs. So does the client, so does the dog. And where we all meet in the middle, that's our range of safety, and that's where we should be working, really. It's not just about listening to the dog. We've got to listen to the caregiver too, because they have a complex story often. We've got to be mindful that if you've got a client and they're not doing their homework, and that makes us think, oh, they're not doing their homework, they're not very compliant. Instead of that, I think, I wonder why. Am I asking them to do things they can't do? Are there other things happening in their lives which means that they can't, they don't have the bandwidth to do, all these kind of things. So we've got to check in with each other. And especially as practitioners, I do a lot of education, as you know, on emotional safety for us. Because we have to make sure, if we're going to turn up in an empathetic way of working, we have to make sure that we have self-compassion first and that we're in a well-regulated state. The two big lessons we all have to learn is that we're not responsible for the emotional lived experience of another, even our loved ones. I'm not responsible for Kieran. I'm responsible for trying to make sure it's not a bad one from my point of view, but I'm not responsible for his own feelings and emotions. And secondly, that we won't let other people's perceptions and judgments of our emotional experience affect us. If you get those two things roughly balanced right, it really helps you to cope better. Because most of the time, when we have those negative thoughts, those thoughts are put in our brain by other people. That unhelpful teacher at school, that unhelpful partner, that our trauma, whatever it is,
And they do ruminate. They ruminate over time, especially if you're having a bad day and you have a bit of self-doubt about yourself, and then you suddenly remember somebody had actually said something about that at an earlier stage, and suddenly it festers and next off, imposter syndrome kicks in, and we're all calling Andy, going, help. So, it's just one of those things. I think we're all affected by it at some point.
I would say most adults here in the UK, I can't speak for other places around the world, but struggle with self-esteem, struggle with valuing worth, because of the constant bombardment from a young age and inadequate coping mechanisms and strategies as we come into adulthood. So we have a very defensive, emotional, reactive part of the brain. And anybody who's heard me talk before knows that I think it's good to label that name. That mine's called Bob. And Bob wants to get right in there. And Bob wants to tell me it's not going to work out very well. Why bother turning up in the first place? Nobody likes you. You see, you're not good enough, And Bob's voice has been fed from my trauma, but Bob just wants to keep me safe. That's the point, and I think so we have to learn over time to change our relationship with Bob, to change our relationship with our trauma, change our relationship with judgments and expectations. And emotional health is like physical health. You have to work at it. And even if you work at it, I get affected by stuff. I have my ups and downs. And it doesn't mean that when people say horrible things about you, it doesn't hurt. Of course it hurts. But you build up better resilience. It's almost like an emotional immune system that you have to build these things up. And there's a few little tips here. Naming that part of the brain can be helpful because you recognize actually that's not me. That my Andiness is my human bit of me that has that is beyond that. It's my ability to rationally think and to kind of look at stuff. And supporting that is the notion of feelings are not facts. And we have to recognize that sometimes. And we have to change our relationship with our feelings and still have them and sit with them, but change our relationship with them. Also, Bob wants to use destructive language, but we can allow ourselves to counter that by thinking with more of a descriptive language. And that can be very helpful to kind of think about things when we've calmed down a bit, when we're a bit more clear-headed. We think, right, what actually is happening here? And that brings me on to my next point, which is Bob, with that destructive language, wants to make things about me. I have to, with descriptive language, have to think, what does it say to me? So if I get a bad review or somebody says something not very nice, Bob's in there and I can easily get sucked into Bob's destructive narrative. But when I need to think, okay, now what does this say to me? what it says to me is that person clearly didn't value my service, but it has nothing to do with me as Andy, because they don't know me. That's the difference that we do when we build a healthier self-esteem and have healthier boundaries. We elevate us and our worth and our value away from that. People can say what they like about my work, they can say what they like about me based on their own perception of me, but they don't know me, so it can never be about me, right? There's a very humbling thing to remember here.
It's a very
So every
important thing as
person,
well for an awful lot of our Interdogs members, because they're all professionals. They all run companies and they all have to wade through reviews on a daily basis. And you know yourself, some people just will attack out of the blue and give a 1 star review, even though they've never used your services. And that is so soul crushing for a lot of people. So that the way you deal with it, I think, is going to be of so much benefit to so many people listening to this right now.
well, luckily that doesn't, that kind of thing, thankfully, doesn't happen often, and that's just plain wrong.
Mm.
But one thing that's really important to remember is for every person that knows you and has met you, there is a different version of you. And all those expectations out there, all those judgments out there, it would be crazy to try and change yourself to fit those. But guess what? Many of us have gone through periods of our life or are trying to do that. And it's a completely nuts task because you can't. So for me, and I talk about this with some knowledge from my human psychology education, but also from my own breakdown, Denise. This is the point. My breakdown is what saved me. And my own trauma as a child led to me going through my 20s into my early 30s, not being me, trying to be something to please others, trying to fit a safe narrative for people to like me, and all the kind of things that we can fall into. And actually, when I had my breakdown, it wasn't about me being a new Andy. It was about me finding who I was in the first place, underneath all the crap. And I think we have to allow ourselves those periods of reappraisal. Ideally, we want to do them in a voluntary way. But if not, it gets forced on us by breakdowns, burnouts, whatever else it is. And actually, things like compassion fatigue, especially, what that says to me is that the person who is experiencing compassion fatigue invariably has struggled with self-compassion because they're very connected. There isn't a finite amount of compassion. It's not like you've got a little tub of it. And when you can be compassionate all day, every day, if you're self-compassionate first. So all these things, when we start to have those niggles in our brain, compassion, fatigue, burnout, all these kind of things, it's a sign to us that we're struggling with some burden that we need to think about. And invariably that comes from external stuff that we have to work our way through. And it's vital, in human therapy, it's a golden rule. This is expected professionally, ethically, that if you're going to turn up to hear or be available to at least the experience of another and offer some care and support, you have to be well regulated yourself. Mm-hmm. You can't otherwise, because if you're just not listening to them. You're not. It's not about them now. It's about you. And I think we need more education on this for us as a profession, because we are turning up to the suffering of others on a regular basis. And emotional contagion is a thing, and it will seep. And many of our colleagues, because they're so empathetic, they feel they need to save. They have that righting complex. They take on the burden of others, and it's very tricky. But coming back to the kind of negative review side of things, one thing to bear in mind is people are entitled to their opinion. They can have it. It's theirs to have. And actually, if you want to try and change somebody's opinion, it's quite coercive when you think about it. So they're entitled to it. And either if one of the important questions I ask on my emotional health workshops, and it's a simple one, but a powerful one, and it resonates with everybody who comes, is who are you? Who are you as Mark? Who are you as Denise? Firstly, as a human being, but then as a professional. if you don't know and feel secure with who you are and what you intend to do as a professional, you're already vulnerable when you set foot in that person's house. Many people that I've mentored, many people that I provide emotional health for, they are so in that state that when they arrive there, they feel I've got to let them know I'm worth it. I've got to let them know that they're paid good money for good advice or whatever else. You're already off on the wrong foot. Because then when you get that negative review, it hits home to all those insecurities you already have. If you are secure in what you do, so when I turn up, I know why I'm there. I know the value in what I do. I also recognize that not everybody's going to see that value, Denise, and that's okay. That's okay. I can't make them. They'll either see value in what I do or they won't. So I think we just got to focus this more. I think for all of us, really, not just for professionals, but I think just being a human being. But definitely in our profession, we need more education on emotional support because it's
We do.
tricky.
We do, because as you say, a lot of people want to just jump in and give. It's kind of, when somebody's telling you something and you try to compare it to something you've been through yourself to make them feel better, and you just end up making them feel worse because you've taken the focus off of them and put it on yourself. It's just not the way to do it. You need to listen to what they're saying and don't get so attached and so involved that you have this I have to fix it or my mind will explode type of
Mm,
attitude. And then when we look at what everybody's going through and how complex the human structure, like how complex our emotions, our whole physicality is, and then we look at our dogs and go, goodness, we have the power of words. We use words, animals don't, which makes it even more complex. So you can see how animals have been misjudged, mistreated, misunderstood over the years. We don't even understand ourselves due to lack of education and understanding. How are we
such a
going to
powerful point.
how are we going to understand animals?
Such a powerful point because we don't even recognize stress in fellow humans. We don't even
Mm,
recognize stress in ourselves when we look in the mirror.
yeah,
So it's tricky. And I deliver these emotional workshops myself, but also I've done a few to private training schools, when they want their staff to listen in on this stuff and have a safe space. Because one of the big things about doing that is it encourages people to stop feeling vulnerable and see the power in being vulnerable, because the two are very different. And we need to think about that, and we need to think about, okay, what does this mean for me then, and how does that work? And when we do have those, when we do feel very compelled to save, when we do have that kind of that writing complex, it's often more of a mirror really about some of our own trauma actually, and our own
mm,
frailties and our own need. So to truly turn up in a very empathetic, powerful but neutral way is a skill, and we have to learn it. And it
mm.
doesn't always work out that way. Uh, I have the odd client. I've got one at the moment. I may as well move in with her. To be honest, I see her so often. But you can afford to do more sometimes if you've got the capacity to. If that's what you're doing with virtually every client, it's just not working. Yeah, we have to think about these things, and this comes down to say to building some healthy self-esteem. The important word there is healthy, because not high self-esteem, because that's unattainable. You're going to have your ups and downs. It's
Mm.
healthy. A healthy self-esteem has its ups and downs, its ebbs and flows, and have good supportive boundaries, understanding what your negotiables are and your unnegotiables are. These are just foundatory, really, to living life, let alone working as a professional. But it's especially with the social media side of stuff, with a lot of people's bobs having a go at each other, right? Because that's what it is, with very little compassion often, and people just piling in and stuff. It's tricky to navigate. And many of our colleagues, I call them the quiet majority, they just get on with their work. They're compassionate. They work hard. They don't like social media very much. They don't feel safe spaces are available to them. So instead of those healthy boundaries, they end up having barriers. They put barriers up. Now, the thing about barriers, one good thing about barriers, if I've got a barrier up, you can't get into me. Great. But it stops safe connection. So it can become very lonely then, and you feel very isolated, and you have to go through those boom and bust cycles of emotional health on your own, and it's tough.
I can't actually imagine my childhood growing up if social media was available. I think I would be a very different person to what I am now. I'm far more relaxed. I go with the flow, basically. I mean, we've all been bashed and bullied on social media, but I think we're kind of, some really affects us, and some we just go, oh, okay, it'll be yesterday's news in a few days. But I don't know how young people do it. I don't know how the younger trainers are handling and coping nowadays, because the dog industry is just so volatile right now. There's very little you can post without somebody having something to say, regardless of what side they're on. Everybody, as you say, has an opinion and they want to be heard. And we want to give them that platform to feel heard, but at the same time, pulling other people down and hurting others because you're feeling hurt. How is that helping? How is that helping anybody? You know, how do we kind of get it across to kind of the younger trainers who are really hurt by it? To what can we say to encourage them? Rather than, oh yeah, I've been there, it's grand, you just shake it off. No, just because you can shake it off doesn't mean this other person can. You know, how can we help?
I think it's about us being, especially those of us who have been around a bit, is conversations like this and being vulnerable. I think this is really important. And whenever I've talked about things on almost any level, whether it was my drug addiction, breakdown, sexuality, being bullied, like trolled on the industry, imposter syndrome, all the stuff we get, you don't not have that just because you do well. In fact, the more you do well, the more you like to have it. The number of younger trainers or people, not just young in age, but new to the industry,
Mm,
who reach out and say,
yeah,
God, I really needed to hear that. Because I think part of what's happened is we've got a bit of a perfect storm of a big batch of many unscrupulous business coach types. There's some good ones I know, but there's some out there that are very much into the whole very aggressive marketing thing.
that seems to be a very new wave as well.
Mm.
Only coming out within the last 5, 6 years, they've really come to the forefront, and they
Do you
are
know,
aggressive.
I spoke to a trainer locally through her daughter, who started training, and her daughter reached out to me, and then I said, "Oh, I did reach out to your mum years ago." Anyway, we ended up meeting for a coffee and that, and she said to me, "Do you know, I remember you contacting me, but my coach at the time said don't connect to him because he really kind of put the paranoia into her head and this kind of stuff. It's just
Mm,
rubbish, really." So I think it's very difficult. And if the thing is, there's a really cool little dynamic that we should always be mindful of, and it's enough and more, right? So enough has to be foundated. You have to recognize this is enough. I'm enough. What I do is enough. And then more becomes about growth. What does more look like now? Because this is enough. But what does more look like? What happens, I think, for people who are quite vulnerable coming into the industry, taken over by a lot of the marketingy stuff, is it's all about more. And the trouble is, if you're always seeking more, guess what? It's never enough.
mm,
And that becomes a problem then. And this is where a lot of the crap comes from, I think, and a lot of the stuff. There's two well-known people who have confided in me about two other people who have literally taken their stuff
mm,
and just rebranded it. And because these two people are the kind of people they are, they're not publicly naming these people. And yet these other people are being lauded by everybody under the sun. And they've done something really underhand. And that's something more and more I see. It's just, I've got to get people to hear me. I have to be the right one. I have to have more. And I think it's just, I always try and think about educating in quite a neutral way,
mm.
and people can take what they want from that. Uh, I don't do a lot myself on the big stuff, but the biggest thing is for me the thing that keeps me going, Denise, because because we're friends and I shared a lot of stuff with you in the past that's been thrown my way. I have to ultimately believe that Andy's enough. And if it isn't for some people, I've been called all sorts of crap. And it's really bizarre because if you look at the evidence of what is within the space that people can see it, which is online, the evidence is completely the opposite to what some people's hatred wants to talk about. The problem is some people are very happy to believe it with no evidence, but that's just the way it is. So the point is then, Andy has to be enough. I'm grounded enough in real life with my husband and my dogs and my close friends. That is my reality. This isn't reality that we're talking in now. As soon as I turn this computer off, it's gone. So I think it's a healthier way of looking at stuff, and we do need to have more spaces. What Annie's doing with Pack is amazing. We need more spaces. We're really good at Interdogs with the pastoral care. I would highly invite other organizations and associations who are taking money from professionals to recognize their duty of pastoral care, because I don't think it's given much. It's just a nod to it. And we have to provide these spaces and be available and be vulnerable. And, there is an element of everybody has to kind of work things out themselves a little bit along that process, but they do need a safe anchor at some point.
Absolutely. And I think the one thing I love about Into Dogs is actually our tagline, which was yours, ethics in action. Three simple words that are just above and beyond powerful. And our members have taken that on board. They read through the ethics on the website. I'm so proud of all our members. They just go above and beyond. That's why I just felt it was so important this Christmas that we have just our members talking. You guys are the stars. You're our little Christmas crackers because you all have something so important. And the one thing I've noticed, because these last few have been pre-recorded, we haven't discussed with the other guests what everybody is talking about, but there is a common theme: the individuality of each dog, the individuality of the client, the need for safe space, the need for boundaries, knowing what empathy is. Every single one of you have all been on the same page talking about completely different subjects. And that just goes to show what incredible unity and ethics in action Into Dogs actually has when we break down to the very basic nitty gritty of it. So I really, really love having all of you on.
I think we need to have a big shout out there to Theo, of course, who I think
Absolutely.
when we think about the culture that Theo created, that we've all
Back in
I think
2007.
exactly, yeah, a long
Yeah.
time ago. I think all of us, through Lisa Tenzendon and myself, you, just recognize. I think we've recognized the responsibility of that of supporting that culture,
Yeah.
and this word ethic and ethical is bandied around so much now, and uh, I think we live and breathe it into dogs. We kind of know what it is actually and what it means and what those professional attitudes are, and it's getting a very odd place. I think that the dog world is it's a very odd place at the moment. Claire Staines wrote something which really hit home for me. I know it was Jane Arden, sorry, Jane. When I first started, this is what Jane was talking about. Locally, I was the only one who was using positive methods.
Mm.
We had the kind of obligatory ex-police dog trainer, because we always get this, and and dominance model and aversive. But they were all suitably accredited and trained. Guild of Dog Trainers, CFBA, whatever it was, So at least they had an element of accountability, and and to be fair to them, they were doing what they knew. That's the point. Things move on. Now we've got a situation where every other dog walkers are behaviorists now, apparently. And
Yeah.
the big names on TikTok have no foundatory experience or qualifications at all. We're
But they made a
losing
dog
ground.
sit once.
Well, that's it. So
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
we've got to step up, and of course that's the bigger picture stuff that you're involved with the charter and the things like that. So,
Which would not have happened if it wasn't for you,
well,
the absolute
that's very kind
visionary.
of you, but I had an idea, but it was the
Mm.
coalition of the willing that brought that to fruition, and that's important. I think we have to. Uh, what I did do there was manage to get people talking and get around the
Yeah,
table, and that was no mean feat, I can tell you. But yeah, so I think, but into dogs itself, it's those early markers, those early foundations that were laid by Theo and the others, they're
mm,
still very much there, and we're
yeah.
just custodians of that legacy, really.
We really are. We're like the ninth and tenth Doctors.
Yes, it is like that, isn't it?
It
The
really is like
generation.
Doctor Who, with a new
Yes.
reincarnation every few years.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
So, Mark, have you got anything to add? Because you've been so quiet.
I've just been fascinated just listening. It's lovely to listen to. It's one of those things that there's nothing to add to it. There's nothing you can possibly add to it. And there's lots of valid points in there. I think one of them, when you were talking earlier about resilience to negativity coming your way, and how you learn to deal with that. In my mind, is there a very thin line between knowing how to deal with it and process that, and effectively just being shut down from it. And that's the
Great,
bit I
great
think where an
question.
awful lot of people will sit on that line and wobble from left to right constantly. So is
Yeah.
there anything that someone could do? I don't know. I suppose in a way as well, how does someone know they're on that line? How do they know they're actually just shut down from it and not processing it effectively?
How do they become proactive rather than reactive, basically?
Yeah, well, this does come in from the work we have to put in about discovering self, recognizing our worth, working through the obstacles that are stopping us from having that kind of value of self, because that's what self-esteem is. It's the value of self. And we have to work through that, Mark, because if we aren't foundated in something that is positive and meaningful and sound, then we are more open to the destructive narratives that you're talking about there. And even if you try and keep good, I work hard on my emotional health because I have to. People often comment on how calmly I deal with things and whatever else, but it doesn't come easy. I have to work on it. But even for me, if I'm not feeling very well, if it's the 10th thing that's happened this week, if I'm, then guess what? It gets harder. But if you already come from a relatively positive, founded space, it become a bit more resilient with it. If you're already worn down by the constant barrage of life, then it's really hard. And it's the same, say, physical health, emotional health. If your physical health is good, you're less likely to get the kind of, the sprain and the cough and the cold or, whatever else. But it doesn't mean you won't.
But
And I
we
think
always
that's
talk
the,
about trigger stacking with dogs, and that's exactly what happens to ourselves. I mean, we're like
yeah,
little ducks. We're swans. We glide along the surface, and our little legs are going 90 underneath in
yeah.
panic to keep going. And that's what people don't see.
And many of us end up on that runaway train. And this is why it's
Mm.
important to find ways of, so I try and ground myself every day. I have my own little techniques for that. Everybody has their own different ways of thinking about that. I'm very aware of focusing in on who I am. As I say, that's why I asked that question. Who are you? It sounds like a stupid question too. Has to start thinking about it because a lot of our beliefs and a lot of our value systems are actually put in there by others, including our beliefs about ourselves. So when we start to unpack that, we think, shit, who am I? Actually, I better find out. And that's a journey that we need to go on. And so I think, Mark, it is difficult. And I think the main thing that I think we learn over time is how we change our relationship to things. Because feelings and emotions are important, but it's our relationship with them. I have my little ouch thing that I say, and I deliberately say that because I've conditioned myself. So if you said something horrible about me now, Mark, either out loud or in my head, I'd go, ouch. Now, even just by going, ouch, it's already taken the sting away. because I've labeled it. Oh, ouch, that was ouch. This is going to be ouch. So I'm already there with it. And also how we change our relationship with two very important words. It could be a good place to finish, I guess, and that is guilt and shame, because these are two of the things that come up a lot. Guilt has one of two ways of going. It either locks us into the past, and that's when it becomes really destructive. Or we recognize it as a very deep, visceral learning event. So if I think back to something and it makes me feel that way and I perceive that to be guilt, if I just focus in on the guilt, I'm now attached to the past. If I think, hang on a minute, I learned something very deeply there because that's why I feel like this. What is it I've learned? Because I do have a tomorrow to do things differently. I can't make that right necessarily, but I can do things differently. And that's what I talk about with my clients, because often when they, with our help, and they think, oh God, I can't believe I used to do that to my dog, the guilt. And they can keep in the past with that. But when we say to them, good, embrace the guilt. You've learned something really important today. So tell me, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
So that's a good way of changing our relationship with that feeling. It's not about feeling it any differently. It's just changing our relationship. Shame is about judgment, ultimately, and the fear of judgment of others. God, if this gets out, that's the shame thing. And also the guilt, the judgment we put on ourselves. One of the big antidotes to shame is actually being vulnerable and being more open. That's why I share about my drug addiction and my breakdown and my sexualized abuse and things like that, because I will not feel shame for those things. I won't. They're just part of my story. So I think it is about changing our relationship, and especially changing our relationship with judgments and expectations. It's really interesting. There's a lot of evidence on this stuff within the kind of human psychology and psychotherapy literature. We are influenced hugely by the judgments and expectations of others, but we are less so if we change our relationships with our own judgments and expectations. So let's just look at that very quickly. Expectations is about control. And when you understand that, then you think, oh, no, I feel less comfortable about expectations now. So if I have an expectation of you, Mark, what does that mean? I want an outcome that I want to control, that you do, and I expect it of you. So when you think about it, it's like, and then the expectations we put on ourselves invariably are about somebody else's attempt to control us, actually. So that frees us a little bit when we have change our relationship with expectations. Expectations are the mother of all disappointment is the thing, and that's something to bear in mind. With judgments, we are literally wired to judge. We are a judging machine. And we will make a judgment on the very flimsiest of information. And then our brain will make that quick appraisal, cognitive appraisal. We have to change our relationship with judgment. We can't not judge. So when I turn up to that client and they've been using a shock collar and they've done this, that, and the other, I will judge them. But I can learn over time to change my relationship with judgment and not let it drive my actions and become judgmental. So when we are less judgmental of others, all the studies show we become more protected from the judgments of others.
I remember you saying that. I think it was when we did the Christmas talks last year, and you were saying there's that part of our brain that makes that instant. There you go. That's the. Yeah. I've used that so much this year with clients.
Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink is the one. I'll actually put the link into the comments. Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink. If you haven't read it, read it. That is how you make those split. It's thin slicing. It was actually Patricia McConnell wrote about it in one of her books over a decade ago. I spotted the reference, got the book, became addicted to Gladwell's books. He's just such an incredible author. He has The Tipping Point, What the Dog Saw, Blink, all these. And yeah, you can actually pull this into the dog training world because it's more psychology for humans. It's how we think, how we see. And I remember Andy, a couple of years back, just after I lost my mom, and I was struggling, and I said to you, Christmas is never going to be the same. How do I cope? And you said to me, I even said to Danny yesterday, I said, you said to me, make a new tradition. And for the last 5 years, like, what do I do? Do I like buy new decorations? Do I do this? I finally found the new tradition. And I want to thank you for that. And it's just to enjoy Christmas again.
But it can be as simple
Simple.
as that sometimes. It
It
can be.
really is, but it took me 5 years to find that simple solution. I love Christmas. I want to enjoy it again. And it was just you giving me that hint, those few little words, find a tradition. And to me, tradition meant something very different. It meant having to do a repetitive thing. And I thought, no, hang on. Yeah. So it is a lot of speaking and communicating is how the other person interprets it. And I was a bit slow. It took me a couple of years to cop onto that one. So I'm going to hands up here. Sorry about that. But I needed to come around to that in my own time. And I couldn't have if you hadn't said those words to me back then.
And that's the key. I think the important thing there is in your own time. And I think,
Yeah.
I would, any trainers listening who really want to affect some kind of change and that kind of thing, you can't force people. You have to invite people.
Mhm.
And actually, with my dog centre care group, I have balanced and aversive trainers contact me regularly. I spent 3 hours on Zoom with somebody from America going back a while. He was a balance trainer. And because they were ready to think about something else, because they were influenced by some of the things they saw in the group. Many of these aversive trainers have said to me, all I've had is positive trainers pointing fingers, but also telling me how to do tasks differently. And I felt in my own brain, well, I can do tasks very well, thank you. And guess what they can? When they hear a different narrative, a different language, when they are connected through compassion and empathy in a different way, that's when they start thinking, yeah, actually, this does feel uncomfortable. And the reason I say that is because talking and reaching out is great. But to think that we can just try and persuade and influence, it's very hard to because of what we talked about. But inviting people, the best way to do that is to turn up as yourself. My handiness has to be enough. I write what I write about. I create the spaces I create. And then
Stick
after that,
Bob
it's
back in the box.
yeah, and people will
Yeah.
either come or they won't. And they, and sometimes you'll write something and it'll go nuts. Sometimes you see the tumbleweed and you think, okay, that didn't land then. But I'm not going to make it about me. I'm going to think, what does it say to me? What it says to me is either the algorithms weren't working right or people aren't interested. God forbid, that could be the fact. So yeah, I think it's just a healthier way to navigate space, I think. Is not to feel that somehow. And also, somebody said to me, I was at a conference and somebody came up to me and they said, oh, do you know what? You're one of my favorite influencers. And it took me back for a second. So I'm not an influencer. My husband's an influencer. That's how I think about it on TikTok, doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, I thought we kind of are. We're kind of soft. It's a soft influence, isn't it? We can influence in so many different ways. We don't have to have, all those kind of likes on TikTok and everything else. We can just influence by being ourselves, and other people will see that light that we cast, and they'll either accept it or they'll be dazzled by it, whichever way it turns out to be.
Well, actually, on one of our other talks as well, we did touch on the subject of balance and aversive trainers. Like, if you suddenly attack me, you can't do that. It's like, yeah, watch me. If somebody tells you you can't do something, you're going to do the complete opposite to prove them wrong. So no, it's not the way to talk. It's not the way to communicate. Just lead by example. And
Yeah.
this constantly putting things on video. Oh, look what I'm doing. Just do it. Share the memory. Just do it. Just focus, be in the moment, do what you're doing. And, if people like what you're doing, they're going to follow.
Yeah.
They're going to get it. They're going to follow.
And if you're doing it based on your own purpose, I talk about this quite a bit, actually. I think we have to move from passion to purpose, because passion's quite fragile. Purpose gives you a driver. Then you're in a really healthy place. And if it's a gang of one, then it's a gang of one, because ultimately the dogs that we end up helping in our real life, they are very, very, very thankful of our presence. So we don't need. It's always nice to have a pat on the back. We want to be thanked. We want to be validated. That's really important. But if that's what we're seeking, it becomes an unhealthy relationship again. So some things to think about.
Yeah. And there's also this seeking where some people need validation from, say, parents or siblings or people who aren't there anymore. And that's a real turning point for them, because all of a sudden you have to grow up and find yourself. But there are loads of safe spaces to go to if you need to talk about that. You have Annie's pack, you have dog-centered care, and I'm sure Andrew has loads of amazing things coming into the new year, because Andrew never stops. Andrew is a visionary. He really is. Great ideas.
Stay out of mischief somehow, I said.
Right. So listen, thank you so much. As always, we've gone way over, but this was just so interesting, and I'm delighted to have you back on and talking. So have you any? Yeah, oh God, anytime. Have you any parting words for anybody coming into the Christmas?
Well,
take a deep breath,
if you
drink loads.
Enjoy it. I think the thing is, my husband and I, anybody who knows us, they know that beginning of November is when we start getting excited for Christmas. And
I actually love that, and I love the I love that, and I love the reasoning behind it, and I know it's a lot to do with Kieran's job.
Kieran's job, and but also, what I would say is you don't have to be quite as fanatical as we are. But it's better to make it a season. I think a lot of I think it's a bit odd the other way around. I see friends and family who just get so stressed over 2 days. Actually, because of my husband's job, he works Christmas, so it's never about Christmas. It's about, for us, it's the familiarity, it's the traditions, as you say, Denise. We've created our own, our Christmas tree now. We've been together 10 years. We collect tree baubles. Even in the middle of summer, in the middle of Gran Canaria, we'll still find a bauble somewhere. So when we make that tree up, it's a tree of memories now. It's a beautiful
Well, you did send me a nice keyring I will not show online from Tenerife or somewhere. That does go on the tree each year.
Good. So it is about creating our traditions, and it's we do have some choice over these things, and I think like marriages, like parties and Christmas, try not to make it for something that has to be for somebody else. I think that happens a lot. It's a great time of year just to be yourself and enjoy the things you enjoy and be with family and friends or wherever it is. And I know I've got a lot of colleagues, obviously, a lot of friends, in the gay community, being gay myself. But, one thing we're really good at in the gay community is making our own families. And I know people find it a bit fraught at Christmas because they're thinking about families and we have to kind of do our own thing. But, I think, yeah.
Well, I know with Kieran working over the Christmas, and Mike works over the Christmas, so I get you, because I have found over the last few years, I love Christmas because it's me and the dogs and Netflix.
Yes. Yeah. Do you know, there is an aspect of that.
There is. There's no pressure. It's like previous Christmases was manic. There was like loads of cooking, loads of preparation, having to get out to Greystones on time to see the parents, it was just bedlam. Are the dogs going to behave and all this? And now all of a sudden it's like, might get home around 8:30 in the morning. We'll take the dogs for a walk, open presents, eat pizza or whatever. He's going to go to bed, and then I've got the day for Netflix. It's like my day. And it's so cool. So yeah, we all need our own little getaways.
Yeah, for sure. And whatever you do, I hope it's if you whatever you're doing over Christmas, I hope it's a good time. And one thing I like just after Christmas, I feel there's a bit of a power about the new year. It reminds me of being back at school. Remember when we used to get a new textbook at the beginning of term, and it was all,
Yeah.
and by the end of it, it's all tatty and scribbled in. But it's a time. It is a time for reflection, and some of those reflections are a bit uncomfortable. We're talking about today, it's about thinking about those who aren't with us and thinking about the things. But it gives us a chance to recognize. This is why I like some of the pagan aspect of this time of year, the kind of renewal, the winter solstice, the kind of the coming back into the light. So maybe that could be a kind of resolution for some of those listening. Is I'm gonna find myself. I'm gonna leave you with this. It's Dolly Parton, because of course it is. Find out who you are and do it on purpose.
And funny you should say that, because it was something Mark said, I think it was last night. You don't have to wait for the New Year's to make a new start. You can do it whenever you want, and it kind of, that struck a chord with me, because I kind of think, right, in the new year, I'm going to do this, this, and this. Why? Because I'm procrastinating and I'm using New Year's as an excuse. It's exactly that.
And we all do it.
Yeah. Let's see if I can do it. I'm not going to say what I'm planning on doing, because you will hold me to it. I know you will.
Well, accountability is a good thing, Denise. It's a good thing.
Oh, it's pressure. It's pressure. I need to learn to drive. There, I've said it. I need to learn to drive. I've been saying that for years, and each time I say it, something happens. So it's like, oh, anyway. So listen, thanks so much for coming on. Mark, do you have any parting words for?
It's just been another one of those fascinating. Well, I can't even say discussion. I was so quiet, just in what Andy was saying. It's lovely. It's just nice to hear. It's one of those things that so many times throughout the conversation or the the talk, your brain goes, oh yeah, yeah, I do that. So it's quite nice just to have. And what I like about it, it's not you, Andy, saying, right, you've got to go do blah, 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 blah. It's planting all these little seeds that then just kind of sit there for a bit, and then a few days later kind of go, okay. It's just like saying earlier about the bit where your explanation of the little bit of the brain that you can't control that makes a snap judgment, that's the bit I've used for clients, because that gives them, if fundamentally, an excuse to kind of go, oh, okay, it's not a bad thing to get cross. Just don't dwell on it, learn from it, and try and control it in the future.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been wonderful. It's been lovely talking to you again.
Yeah, great.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mark. It was good to see
you. I think everybody's going to get so much from this. So, and what I will do once this goes live, see, well, I don't want to say dead, because we're not dead, we're still alive. Once this recording goes up, I found the proper words. I will link your Dog Centre Care website, your Facebook page, your Phantom of the Operant blog, and everything else, because people are going to be so curious, and we need to get the information out there. So thank you so much again. And thank you everybody who tunes in and watches this, and feel free to share, and just happy Christmas, everybody.
Have a good time. Keep safe. Good night all.